She crouched, making him fly low, and that let Lyman fling himself from her shoulder as she rose again quickly, taking impetus from her movement and leaving a deep scratch in the skin of her shoulder as he did. But their aim was good, and he seized the demon bird in the air and bore him to the ground in a tangle of squawking, screaming, scratching anger. And from the house behind them came a high, wild scream, the voice of a witch. Lyra spun around to face her. Pan had the advantage of weight and power over the other demon, but it would be quite different with the witch herself, an adult to Lyra's youth, and one used to fighting and ready to kill besides. What did it mean? Lyra's mind was whirling. They'd nearly walked into a trap, and now Lyra, weaponless, would have to fight to stay alive. She thought, Will, be like Will. It was all happening too quickly. The witch hurtled out of the door, half falling, stumbling, knife in hand, her face contorted and her eyes bulging and fixed on Lyra. The two demons were still struggling, snarling, snapping, biting, tearing, and each of their people felt every blow and every scratch. Lyra moved into the centre of the little street and backed away towards the edge of the canal, thinking that if she could get the witch to charge towards her. The witch's face was scarcely human anymore. It was a mask of madness and hatred, so forceful that Lyra quailed to see it. But she kept the image of Will firm in her mind. What would he do? He'd be still. He'd wait for an opening. He'd make sure of his footing. He'd be perfectly balanced. And she was ready, as the witch rushed at her, to meet her force with all the courage she could summon. But then the strangest thing happened, in a second or less. There came a dizzying blow to Lyra's head, and she staggered aside as a vast white shape hurtled past from behind her, straight at the witch. The air was filled with a monstrous rapid creaking of gigantic wing beats, and then before she could catch her balance, the witch was smashed back and down against the road by the full force of a swan flying full tilt. Pan cried out, for the demon bird was loose and twitching in his grasp. The witch, still just alive, was crawling towards Lyra, crawling like a broken lizard, and there were sparks around her, real sparks, as her knife grated on the stone. Beyond her, the swan lay stunned, his great wings spread out helplessly. Lyra was too sick and dizzy from the blow to do more than push herself up feebly and try to marshal her thoughts. But then Pan said shakily, "He's dead. They're dead, Lyra." The witch's eyes still bulged and glared, fixed on Lyra, and the muscles of her arms still held her top half rigidly up from the ground. But her back was broken, and there was no life in her expression. Suddenly, the muscles gave way and she flopped to the ground like a rag. The swan was moving, hauling himself along, unable to stand. And just above, Lyra heard that powerful creak once more and felt the rush of air as 3 more swans flew across the canal and low along the street, over their stricken brother. People in the houses nearby must have heard all this. There must be faces at the windows, doors opening, but Lyra couldn't be afraid of that. She forced herself to her feet and ran to the fallen swan, who was beating his wings awkwardly and scrabbling for perches on the smooth road. Ignoring her fear of the stabbing beak, she knelt down and put her arms under the hefty bulk of him and tried to lift. Oh, it was so awkward, and he was full of fear as well, beating and struggling. But then she found the best angle, and he came up cleanly in her arms. Stumbling, clumsy, slow, trying not to step on his trailing, sweeping wings, she carried the swan to the end of the street, where the black water of the canal gleamed beyond the pavement. Over her head, returning, the other swans came past so low that Lyra felt the snap of feathers in her hair and felt the sound they made in her very bones. And then she was at the edge of the water, and she bent down, trembling with the weight of him, and he slid heavily out of her grasp and into the dark water with a splash. After a moment he swung upright and shook his wings, standing up in the water to beat them hard and wide, and then he sank down again and paddled away. Further along the canal, the other swans skimmed down onto the water one after the other, and swam towards him, faint white patches in the dark. Lyra felt a hand on her shoulder. She was too shaken already to be further startled. She merely turned, to see a man in his 60s with a dazed and ravished face and scarred, sooty hands. His black cat demon was close in conversation with Pan at their feet. "This way," he said quietly, "and you won't be caught up in anyone's curiosity. Now she's dead, the street will begin to wake up."